When you think of the idea of a shock jock, there is one name that comes to mind, and that is Howard Stern. For 40 years, he has been the guy. He has influenced generations of comedians, of podcasters, of radio hosts. But Howard's big contract with SiriusXM is up for renewal. Today on the show, does the world still need Howard Stern? I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Matt Hart is here, Niko Stratis is here, Ashley Ray's here. Hello to all of you. Welcome, everybody.
Hey.
This is going to be a very un-Howard-like conversation in the sense that we are on public radio. Okay, so behave.
Speak for yourself.
Everybody behave. Wow. We are off to a great start. Okay, before we get into it, I think like maybe we could just for a moment, let's set the scene with this.
As most of you probably know, everybody doesn't like our show.
Well, I can't imagine.
I know. There are people, believe it or not, there are people who don't understand, who are afraid of the new ideas and unusual aspects of this program.
You mean people actually object to what we're doing?
Well, let's face it, some people are pinheads who just don't get the joke. But for every 10,000 quacks out there who want to see me taken off the air, there are 10 or 20 really sick shut-ins who worship my every movement.
That's right.
That's right.
I think that ratio sounds about right to me in terms of the ratio that he's describing. I will also say that, like, in addition to all of that, though, if you're listening to this conversation, you've got some young ears beside you. Maybe this is the conversation to send the kids into another room for just a moment. Now, what you just heard there is Howard Stern, his co-host, of course, Robin Quivers from 1992, back when he became known as the king of all media, radio host, TV host, best-selling memoir author, and then he was in his own biopic, which, of course, actually starred alongside a young Paul Giamatti at the time. Matt, you were a big listener to Stern at the time. Tell me about the thing that made Stern Stern. What was key to his appeal?
So it wasn't really that I was like seeking out Stern as much as it was kind of ubiquitous. It was everywhere and in certain places. So like when I worked warehouse jobs, back kitchen jobs, like dishwasher jobs, like that was all full of dudes, it would always be on. So, I mean, it did have a purpose in that sense because you get this kind of camaraderie around it and you had people from all over the world at these places, right? So it kind of brought everyone together and not in a sense that it was like uniting. It was more about like a social order. We would be like, is this guy serious? Is he kind of a joker? You know what I mean? And you kind of got that from all of your coworkers there and we all had something to talk about, which was really cool. It was the one thing that kind of broke up the day. And I famously had a friend of mine, a guy who used to play in my band, and he worked in a marina all night, midnight to 8 a.m. or something like that. And he told me, he was a really big Stern fan, and he told me that he loved Stern because when he came on at like 5 or 6 in the morning, that it was like a friend showed up. Because it was just another voice. I don't think it mattered that it was Stern. It was just that was there, that was kind of appealing. And he felt like
a relationship.
Yeah. And that's where Stern was kind of important, I think, for kind of like people that were outcasts. Because Stern wasn't like hunky or cool, really, you know what I mean? Like, he was cool in that he was popular, but a lot of kind of outcasty people saw themselves in Stern more than, you know, some super hunk, basically.
I want to pick up on a couple of elements of the things that you just said there. One of them is the idea of labor, the idea of like Stern as like someone who, like, if you're at work, if you're going to work, like that is a bit of your relationship to what Howard Stern is or when he sort of like shows up in your life. Because Niko, I read your book, The Dad Rock That Made Me a Woman. Love that book.
Thank you.
And a great deal of your book is talking about long drives. Yeah. And in those long drives, you had Stern on. You know, Stern would sort of be a companion on some of those long drives. Do you want to talk about like how Stern maybe changed radio or change your relationship to radio?
Well, so I got into Stern in the Sirius satellite radio, like when he made the move, because then I bought a
subscription.
Well, I love describing this because it sounds like I invented the first rock. Because it's like, because I bought the like Sirius thing and I had a thing I had to put in my car, in my like 95 Mazda. And then I ran
your way to do it.
Yeah, and I like ran a wire to a thing I put on the roof, you know?
Yeah.
And then, but I was like doing these long drives from the Yukon to Alberta and I was listening to Stern and it was this new world for me. It like opened up this world. This guy that I'd known about because I had seen the movie and like if you were alive, you kind of knew who Howard Stern was, even though I lived in the Yukon. We barely had AM radio, let alone anything else. Like we weren't getting Stern on an affiliate, but like, so it sort of opened up the world to me and it became this part of me a little bit. Like I would do these long drives by myself, you know, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, listening to Stern. And it was like, oh, I'm part of something. It's like you said, it's like a universal language it gives you of, okay, understand New York now because I've listened to Howard Stern, which is not true, it turns out. When you go to New York City and you're like, where's all the Stern stuff? stuff. And people were like, oh, we don't talk about that here anymore. But like at a time, it was this thing, and it was like, you know, it's like ancient podcasts where it was like, okay, there's a radio host guy that I care about, and he's famous.
I mean, the thing that sticks out for me is like that story of like the effort you had to go through to get Stern on satellite radio, Ashley, because like when he made that jump in 2005, it was like this idea of, okay, this is someone who's available on a lot of radio, a lot of affiliate radio stations. Then suddenly he's paid $500 million for a 20-year contract to satellite radio. And I have to learn what satellite radio is. And that was, you know, that's a whole new experience. For you, Ashley, what was your introduction to Stern?
Yeah, I went to a school that didn't have buses, so my mom had to drive me to school every morning, and she loved morning radio and morning DJs. I'm from Chicago, and Man Cow was another morning show, and Man Cow and Stern like had a huge beef. So that's how I like learned about Stern and was like, oh, this is drama. And then by high school, I had SiriusXM and was like, oh, okay, now he's clearly the winner. No one cares about Man Cow. Howard Stern is cool.
I just want to also like meditate on the sentence "Man, Cow, and Stern had huge beef," which is like truly, I've never heard a more early 2000s sentence in my life. Okay, once again, I just want to remind people, if you've got young ears beside you, you might have to do some explaining to them, but I want you guys to maybe cover their ears for the next 25 seconds or so.
This is Dynamite. Let me bring her in. Dynamite is a porno star. She's even gone down to the Bunny Ranch in Nevada and offered herself up for sex. Dynamite, you're going to be 21 when?
June 13th.
June 13th is the big day. And you claim that on your 21st birthday, you want to have sex with 21 different men. And the 21st man, the last guy to go, perhaps the most important guy, can be one of my listeners.
The capper, if you will.
Yes, sir.
Robin Quiver adding the capper, if you will. Matt, obviously you can't talk about Howard Stern without talking about moments like this. Like moments that sort of like put him in the news quite often. Over his career, he faced millions and millions of dollars in FCC violations because he would do stuff like this on the radio. Is it fair, you think, to reduce his entire legacy to being the shock jock guy, or was there more to him than these moments?
Yeah, I think so. And also saying it like in a negative way, a shock jock, that's like still a tried and true formula. You know what I mean? Like people say that, you know, shock jock is really reductive and we look at it as like hacky now, but that was at one time new. Keep in mind it was like Casey Kasem before that doing like, oh, here's another long distance request. And then he comes on with this. And so I can understand why.
I'm obsessed with your Casey Kasem impression, by the way. That was incredible. I mean, you're going to do Rick D's next, by the way. You just hang on
I'm stealing myself.
We're bringing up the dinosaurs,
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, was he creepy and weird with women? Yes. Was he?
Quite often.
Yeah. Was it easy for us to look at right now and say, oh, this is aged poorly? Yeah, but we're looking at history through today's lenses, I think, with this. And was anyone super offended by Stern back then? If you were, a lot of times it was really puritanical right-wing people that were like, get this smut off the radio. You know what I mean? So nobody's really taking issue with the content as much. I think it's one of these things that now we can take issue with, but I don't remember at the time like it being a drawback. People were like, oh, he's going to say what? You know what I mean? He's a shock jock. So it's like when you tell these people or you find them, you're saying, here's what not to do. And they're like, you're strengthening my brand here. Like you're giving me content by saying what you're offended by.
I'm interested in that contrast because actually I think what Matt is trying to say there is that in some ways we're maybe more censorious now than we were then. The idea that like, yeah, sure you could get offended at Howard Stern, but he could still do that kind of thing and it could still generate and create conversation and there's maybe some room on the spectrum for it. Is that also your interpretation?
Yeah, I think back in the day, I don't think Howard Stern really faced any pushback until he decided to do a stripper bus in New York City and underage girls got on it. And that was the first time people were like, hey, wait a second, you clearly broke a law.
Yeah.
And now I think just his first time interviewing a porn star, people would have been like, this is problematic. What is he doing if it was now? But I also think with podcasts, we've really just reinvented the wheel. Like now you have people interviewing like Bonnie Blue and women who are sleeping with 100 people because it's what people are entertained by. So I do think Howard kind of defined this genre. And I think he kind of regrets it. And that's why later in his career, he just kind of totally turns his back and is like, I'm just going to be a cool, chill guy who interviews celebrities.
I think that part really feels true to me. Like there's Howard Stern everywhere for those with the eyes to see. You know, like there's a real element of that. And also like this show, the Howard Stern show, it was not just about Stern. It was also about all of these side characters. Have a listen to this.
Why are you in a bad mood today? Why is everyone saying Beatles is down? I mean, I know you called
my pressure's up too high, you know?
Pressure.
Yeah. What kind of pressure you under? What's going on?
I'm on medication, you know what I mean?
Oh, I didn't know that. What medication are you on?
Paxils.
Paxil?
Yeah.
Oh, that helped me once, Paxil.
Artie was on Paxil.
Yeah, antidepressant.
Yeah.
It really helped me, Beat.
Why are you
Beetle is on
depressed?
Paxil?
I mean, you're handsome.
Well,
You're
sometimes I'm not depressed. Sometimes I go a little higher, but my pressures go a little higher, though.
Okay, so what you heard there is Lester Green, but people listen to Stern know him better as Beetlejuice, who's a New Jersey man with dwarfism and microcephaly, which means his head and brain are smaller than average. Niko, what do you make of the way that Howard brought out a bunch of different side characters and built them into what the show became?
You know, what's interesting to me listening to that back is like the amount of humanity he gives this person that he's got on the air. And this this is not an uncommon thing. He's not like, sure, a bit of it I'm sure is rooted in, isn't it funny? But when he does it, when he's got these people on, it's not, okay, now we're going to make fun of you on the air. It is having a conversation. It is, how are you feeling? What's going on? And sure, I'm sure a little bit of his winky, you know, that is like, part of it is he thinks it's funny, but he's not outwardly insulting. You know, it is like, okay, you're part of this. You're given this platform. Some of these people would go on to have their own careers, which I'm sure part of it is trying to make hay while the sun shines. But like, it is this idea of who are the people in the world around me, not just the famous people, who are the people that live in the city, that live on the street, and how can I give them a voice to build out the world that I have created? And
that idea of like they went on to sort of build lucrative careers out of these moments, I think that's something that even in the discomfort of listening, being like, I don't know if he's doing this for a laugh or not. I can't tell. Sure. The reality is a lot of his side characters did, in fact, end up creating, you know, lengthy careers out of being on the Stern Show.
And you can see it as a bit exploitive, right? There is a little bit of like, we're going to get people that are outside the norm. And there's an exploitive angle on that. And again, we are looking at things through 2025 that happened, you know, in the 90s and the early 2000s and whatever. But there is that element of, we're going to give them a voice and they can do whatever they want with it afterwards. They can build their own brand. And I'm sure some of that, again, is like, well, I was famous on Stern, so I'm going to have to make some money off this now.
So I want to get to this idea of whether we still need Stern in this media environment now, and I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But actually, I think like there is, as part of getting to that, there is this sort of trajectory of people who say, at a certain moment, I got to get off the Stern bus. I've had sort of enough of Howard Stern. Tell me about getting turned off by the stuff that Stern, you know, started attempting in his career.
Yeah, you know, I think the underage girls on the bus thing,
That'll
that
do it.
was, for me, it was a bit of a turnoff. But after that, I think when he started getting published pushback, a lot of people were saying he's racist. And he had that classic pushback of, I have a black co-host. A black woman is on my show. I can't be racist.
Talk about it.
And yeah, the tokenism there was just an issue because within the black community, people had called out Robin Quivers many times before saying, you know, you're supporting him in these stereotypes. You aren't helping anyone. You're just there to be the token. And at the end of it, you know, at the time before I was turned off, I would defend her and kind of be like, it is cool. She gets it. And after I was like, oh, yeah, this is just his way to get away with doing bad things.
Okay, I will say that for me, like Robin Quivers was one of the most famous black women on the planet for a moment because like she was next to Stern. Like she would have these conversations. She was on the show. And that's not nothing. And then eventually you kind of get to a moment, or it sounds like you eventually got to a moment, Ashley, where you say, she's also a bit of a shield. She's also a bit of a shield for the moments when Stern kind of gets too far. Do you feel like she kind of carries water? Did you feel like she kind of protects him from accusations of racism?
Oh, absolutely. Even when guests would try to push back in the middle of an interview, Robin would be there to defend Stern. There was one time they were interviewing a porn star whose name I believe is Spontaneous Explosion. She was the first black woman to sleep with over 300 men. And an honor. And Howard Stern just kind of goes on all these stereotypes. You don't have a father in the house. Like, oh, is it because your mom was selling drugs?
Oof.
And it's like horrible. You can tell she's upset because actually she had worked in hip hop and had this great career. And she goes off on him. And Robin is just like, here comes this angry Black woman. And it's like, oh my God, really? Like, you're just going to dismiss her feelings. She clearly is upset with how Stern is talking to her and about her. And you can't even try to help support her and pivot the conversation in a way that doesn't make her feel awful. And then he just kind of ends it. That's the laugh is, haha, see, Black person stereotypes. I guess let's get her some watermelon. And at that point, I'm just kind of like, what am I laughing about here? You know, this is, I don't feel like being a fan of this show tells people I'm a good person.
I will say, I don't think you have listened to enough Stern if you've never gotten to a moment of being like, what am I doing here? What is
What are we
this
doing
thing
here? Exactly.
What are we all doing? What is this thing offering me? And also, what is this thing saying about me? My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this show is called Commotion. Ashley Ray's here, Niko Stratis is here, Matt Hart is here, and we are talking about the legacy, but also the uncertain future question mark of Howard Stern. Matt, we talked about the idea that he makes the leap, you know, from radio to SiriusXM in this deal, $500 million for 20 years or so. At the time, obviously, a very smart financial move for him. But when you kind of like look at that, you know, that move now, podcasting becomes this massively accessible, you know, medium. A lot of people are willing to pay a lot of money for podcasting. Was moving to something like a premium subscription service, was that the best move for his overall brand? Because I kind of feel like he disappeared a little bit when he went to Sirius.
Yeah, so for his brand, I wouldn't really say, because you've now taken away that warehouse radio aspect. Because back then, like, Sirius was still pretty new technology for a lot of people. Like, I didn't have it, and a lot of people I know didn't. So you took away that kind of community, you know, locker room talk thing. And I think that needs to be said is, like, when you get in those environments, in my experience, it's like you instantly go to like the lowest common denominator jokes when it's like 50 guys in a warehouse. You know what I mean? That's just naturally the one thing we can all kind of agree on. You know what I mean? So it was a lot of that. And once that went away, I think that he kind of lost the plot a bit. And also, I mean, now him trying to be relevant, he's done so many things that have kind of altered his brand. So he's taken away a lot of his power, I think, with a lot of the choices he's made. Like, you know, America's Got Talent and stuff, that's not really on brand for him. You know what I mean?
Judge on America's Got Talent.
And having said all that, like, I mean, he did walk away with $500 million. I would do godless things for that money. So I'm not in a position to judge.
And Howard Stern did do many godless things for that money.
Exactly.
Niko, two things. One, a lot of your book is being like, use 50 guys in a warehouse. Sometimes an environment can emerge, and where you go, yikes, a lot of not great things happening here. But also, it's not lost on me that the idea that, like, if that is who you influence, you know, and that ends up creating an entire subculture, a subculture of edgelords, a subculture of an entire podcasting ecosystem, right? That is like, you know, at least when podcasting started to get big, a lot of the major players in it, then and now, are basically just doing Stern light in a way. Right? Where do you see Stern's influence now as you kind of like look at the manosphere and the edgelord behavior that is on the internet?
He's the Joe Rogan of the left. But it is this thing, right, where it is like, sure, you can sort of look at him as like, you know, single-handedly crafting the manosphere, but like, you have to also look at an era, right? Like the Man Show, like somehow Jimmy Kimmel just gets to skate on without anybody ever being like, hey, remember the Man Show?
The Man Show? It was worse than Stern.
Totally.
Girls on trampolines.
Every show ends with girls on trampolines, and only one of them became outwardly super racist right afterwards. So there is this sort of era, right, where like now you do sort of have to reckon with your legacy of like, what have I wrought with these two hands, and like what responsibility do I hold? And like, sure, men can get away with doing whatever as long as they've as long as they're rich and powerful, and pretending to do it with some sort of altruistic reason of, oh, I'm speaking truth, or I'm saying the things that nobody else will. We've seen where that goes now, and it's like, okay, you actually have to have some sort of control over yourself.
Right. First of all, the idea of all of us being like, oh yeah, the Man Show, that was a disaster. It felt like Jimmy Kimmel just grew a beard, and then everyone was like, forget about that. He's a respectable, late night host now.
Sure.
Forget about that moment.
They sand the edge off you. They put a suit on you, and they say, do a monologue that somebody else writes every night, and we'll forget the sins of the past.
I know. They certainly seem to have. But also, I think like the idea again of Joe Rogan and being in a relationship with Howard Stern. Like Joe Rogan, for the vast majority of his career, not to take away anything from what he's accomplished, but he just is Stern, or like is sort of doing like a lot, like a format of Stern light. You know?
Sure.
Like, if you ever listen to an episode of Joe Rogan, you kind of go like, well, that's what Stern does, and there's something really familiar about that. Also, he's on a publicly accessible medium, and that ends up making him a lot of money. Stern could have made $500 million for merely 2 years as opposed to 20.
And he's appealing to that lowest common denominator you're talking about, and he's giving people an excuse to say the things out loud that live in their head, right? And it's feeling like, okay, here is level ground for you to think and feel and act on all your terrible impulses, and maybe join in with all these other people that are giving me an ungodly amount of money to be the worst person alive.
Okay, let's land it here. We've heard some clips earlier from like the wild years, I think, of the Howard Stern show. But here he is. He's talking to Stephen Colbert in 2019 about how Howard Stern's interview style, how it's changed since the days of terrestrial radio.
My feeling was I needed to constantly pump the ratings, do something different every 5 minutes, and the idea of having a long-form interview on terrestrial radio was impossible.
That is one thing I'll say, is that an hour and a half with you is incredibly enjoyable because your research is extraordinary. You ask me questions that no one, I've been interviewed by a million people. You ask me questions, almost every one of your questions was different than any other question I've gotten before.
Actually, when you hear that, what do you make of this idea of Stern having a pivot to being a more serious, sort of empathetic kind of host? Do you buy it? Are you on board? Or are you kind of like, it is true, but it doesn't make me forget the other stuff?
I do buy it. I do think the Stern that we see now is sincerely disgusted with his old behavior. I think he understands how he led to the moment that we're in now. And he is not a person who's a Republican. He is someone who believes in COVID, who, really is pretty liberal and is like, now I just want to interview like Jewel and Seth Rogen. I'm sorry that I ended up starting like the man movement or whatever. So I do believe it. I think he does really understand interviewing and making fun of people with Down syndrome was not the right thing to do. But I also think his response to that is to just step back. I think with his contract ending, I don't know that we'll see him pivot to YouTube. That just seems... if I was him, I would just be like, I'm a recluse. I just want to stay in my house now, and I'm retired and I'm done and I did what I had to do. I had a show with Sirius and we recorded in the same studio sometimes. And he is such a just isolated person who likes to be on his own. Like he would like close off the studio, go right in, and is just like, this is Howard's area. So I don't know, podcasting to me just doesn't feel like his vibe. And I think he kind of understands like the time for Howard Stern has maybe passed and he has his money.
Matt Hart, you're 71 years old. You got $500 million. Are you knocking on Spotify's door and be like, hey, give me a 10-year deal? Or are you like, maybe it's time to go fishing?
Yeah, well, he's got to figure out what he wants to be or what he wants to do right now, because I think, we can sit and talk about what he's done to his brand or whatever, but all of this, being more progressive and stuff, it's like watching Jimi Hendrix pick up a bassoon. You're like, what the hell's this? You know what I mean? The guy made a career out of being offensive, and now he's like softer and kinder. So I think that's going to do something, not great for his brand. And here's the thing: he's 71. Like, do we want a shocking 71-year-old anymore?
Maybe.
Can they be shocking, a 71-year-old? Like, your edges get rounded down a little bit, I think. So I see him going
to Ted Danson, buddy.
I see him going to maybe like a Spotify, a Netflix, or something like that. But he was always a good interviewer, right? But the problem was his content. So I just don't think you're going to see him do My Next Guest like Letterman. You know what I mean? Where it's like he sits down and has a heart-to-heart with John Mulaney or anything like that. It's going to be more of the same. And I don't know what the market is going to be like for that.
The idea of Stern sitting down with like Barack Obama. Like, my next guest is Barack Obama. I'm curious about that. But Niko, last word to you. Where do you want to see Stern take his energy next?
I think he can just retire. It's fine. We don't need one more white guy that is like, I'm going to talk to a famous person for an hour. Like, oh yeah, nobody's done that. Nobody's doing that on every other channel. Like it is like, it kind of offers nothing. So like either come up with an idea that like brings something new to the table, to a really crowded table, or Yeah, just retire. Get a couple of pools and just be like, I'm a pool guy now. That's fine.
I go to pool 1, I go to pool 2, depending on the day.
Look at my 7 pools.
I'm sensitive to the idea that, if you're Howard Stern, you are looking upon a world and saying, I changed all of this, and maybe it's time for me to do something else. I also just appreciate your time and your energy and your reflection and your thoughts. You guys, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Yes, of course. Niko Stratis is a creator of the Anxiety Shark newsletter and the author of the recent book, The Dad Rock That Made Me a Woman. She's based in Toronto. Matt Hart is a former morning show host on Indie 88 and leader of the band The Russian Futurists. Ashley Ray is a comedian and host of the newly revived TVSA podcast. She was in Los Angeles. Me, I'm just some guy, but my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Hey, find us on Instagram. We are Commotion CBC. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day. If you're around tomorrow, can we do this again? Can I see you then? I'd love to see you then. See ya.